All right, Pastor Michael, we are back at Sabbath Talk, I don't remember what we'd call this, making everyone Sabbatarians again. What did we call these? I don't know.
Feet on the ground, dirt in my veins.
I don't even know. Is that bad that we don't remember the thing we started?
Yeah, we started a thing, but we're actually continuing to do a thing. So that's like even more
The
commitment.
Sabbath thing we did before and said we were going to keep doing, we're doing it again.
We're doing it again. So you can remind us of the name. So the last time we were talking about how I think we need to ask everyone to just stop taking the exception to the Sabbath in the Westminster. I want to give one that is going to be more applicable to everyone listening as we start to consider, man, what would it mean for me to keep the fourth commandment? Because eventually, if you're listening to this podcast, you obviously are aware. But if you kind of come into the Reformed world, you have this moment where you go, oh, wow, everyone says I have to keep the Sabbath or I have to do the Lord's Day or whatever. And I think a problem that almost immediately occurs is legalism. Legalism is the next obstacle you must face in order to get in tune, obeying this command.
Yep.
Now, I don't want to start with a clarification. I don't mean legalism as anyone saying you need to obey the Sabbath and not work, right? Any command for obedience is immediately decried as legalism, and that's not what I'm talking about. Pastor Michael, how would you help someone who's beginning to think about the Sabbath avoid legalism that's going to get in the way?
Yeah. There's actually quite a few things that we should probably talk through, and maybe we won't
Right.
cover everything this time, but there's a lot of things that will help in this way. As we're, because like you're saying, and actually, I just had some email correspondence with somebody very recently who listened some to the podcast. Actually, then because we had a Sabbath episode, asked questions specifically about that as they're coming into the more confessionally reformed world. Hey, here are questions I have about the Sabbath and how we keep it. And to be clear, I think it's very difficult when we're living in a world that doesn't care at all.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, therefore, it doesn't matter. It just means you cannot actually go about this as we often do when it comes to the law of God, which is through the lens of that kind of perfectionism, right? I think a lot of times legalism is in some ways a form of perfectionism. Like, oh, keeping something like this means I have to do everything exactly right, or I'm not doing it. There's nothing that pleases God in what I'm doing if it's not perfect. And so just to start, I think you need to keep in mind the character of God, because it doesn't actually help you at all when you come to the idea of a Sabbath, of the Lord's Day, of having a day set aside for worship and rest and fellowship and things which are good in themselves. When you come to that, and instantly what you begin to think is, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. You're actually not obeying God as far as doing something in a way that's consistent with his character. Because yes, God prohibits some things to Israel for the Old Testament Sabbath, but even the prohibitions, we would say, are for instance, the negation of the 10 Commandments, right? You shall not, you shall not, you shall not. How does Christ sum those things up? He sums them up by saying the whole law is summed up in this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. So in other words, you fulfill the law positively, not negatively. Actually, if you don't love God and love your neighbor in how you practice the Lord's Day, then you're not actually obeying him just because you told your kids they couldn't play.
Right.
Right? Like that mindset of don't is not what God is like. It doesn't mean that there are not prohibition, but those prohibitions come out of the positive character of God. Right? The God who is abounding in steadfast love and slow to anger and forgives our sins. And who, by the way, made the Sabbath for man, not the other way around. And so, and we can get more into that, but I do think that's a great place to start.
Absolutely.
Remember who God is. That doesn't change when it comes to the Sabbath.
Yeah, because I think there are two really important things you're talking about here. I don't know why, but when we get to the Sabbath, suddenly everyone's like, the goal of obedience to the law is perfection or nothing, baby. Like that it's all or nothing. Either I'm going to do this perfectly or it can't be a binding command on me.
Yep.
No, and none of us, we are never obeying to be perfect because we aren't. We are never obeying to have a right standing with God because we aren't. We are obeying because it's good, because God is good, because it's good for us. And so I do think even for a person who's beginning to try to obey the Sabbath, it is way better. Like, because here's what's going to happen. And again, I'm not all of these questions are inappropriate. The first thing you're going to want to ask is something like this: can I check my email on Sunday? You're going to start asking all these these micro application law questions. And
also, by the way, when does it begin?
Yeah, of course.
When is it exactly?
Yes.
Is it when the sun
Is
goes
it
down
midnight
on
to
Saturday?
midnight?
Is it midnight to midnight? Is it what? Yeah.
If I don't hit 24 hours, did I violate it?
Right.
If I start preparing for my week Sunday night, is that wrong? Yeah, there are all these micro questions, and I'm not saying they have no value. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
They are the 100% wrong place to start.
Yes.
The place to start.
Absolutely.
The place to start are these positive things. Like today is for worshiping God. Today is for enjoying God. Today is for feasting. Today is, right? The Puritans said, it's the marketplace day of the soul. Today is the day where my soul goes crazy with good things.
Yeah.
For me and my family and my church. What would all of those things look like?
Yes.
Start dreaming there, right? You've grown at times in your Christian life. Most people, if they tell me about times they've grown in their Christian life, talk about a conference or a camp, and these things are good. I'm so happy. And they're like, I went there and I was able to be with Christians and focus on the Lord completely around people, and we were without the outside world. And I'm like, dude, that is so great. What if God said you should do that every single week?
We ate all our meals together. We hung out in the evenings. Yeah.
We were unrushed. Yes. Amen. I love it. Let's name that the Sabbath. It's there for us. This is what we have. And so, yeah, I just think telling a person, and for me and myself, starting with the positives is so important. It's really important.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I also then one of the ways maybe you could see, hey, am I falling into this? Is read through the Gospels and look at how Christ handles and talks about the Sabbath versus the Pharisees and how they deal with the Sabbath. For instance, one example being Jesus heals people on the Sabbath. And what the Pharisees think right away is, hey, you're not supposed to do that. Right. The first thing they go to is hey, I thought that was a do not.
Right.
Like the moment that you get to the point where you see somebody helping somebody else, caring for somebody else, doing something that benefits somebody else, and your first thought is, hey, you can't do that.
Right.
I would argue there's already something wrong in how you're thinking about this day. Now, I do think that, again, because we live in a time that this is not a culturally common practice, it does make it harder in certain ways. And because of that, and because, like we said, you really can't start with that idea of, well, we just have to be perfect or nothing.
Right.
What that means is actually we're probably going to be on some spectrum as far as moving toward and growing into our ability to enjoy the Sabbath more and more. And so that may mean, by the way, hey, somebody comes to the church and they have to work on Sunday. Not every Sunday, but some Sundays. If it's every Sunday, very early on, I'm going to start encouraging them. Hey, you should try to find a way around this. Go talk to your boss. It really isn't good for man to be alone. You really need to be here on Sunday mornings if you can. Versus if somebody is called into work once in a while on a Sunday, or it happens a little bit more infrequently, it's probably not the first thing I'm starting with, right? When I first meet somebody, I'm like, well, you really got to change that. No.
Right.
Now, in an ideal sense, would I love if everybody did not work on a Sunday? Of course. That's what I want. I would love if we had laws that said, hey, like, you really can't, except for necessary services, be open on a Sunday.
Next episode, don't worry, we'll come to some of that. But yeah,
some of that would be awesome, right? We're not there. And I think, again, part of the legalist mindset is we need to be there today.
Yes.
No, you can't.
Yes. Oh man, this is so good, because the other thing that comes up when I start saying you have to keep the Sabbath, the next thing people start asking is, so are you saying you're going to put people under church discipline based on what they do Sunday afternoons? Yeah. And it's like, I don't know why we get into this weird idealistic legalism that all of these things are on a prudential, pastoral perspective. Like, I don't know why, but it is hard to do it. And so I actually think one of the things you need to do as you grow, knowing I'm a baby, I'm weak, I'm bad at this. Our culture does not worship God. It does not rest. We are tired and depressed, and we hate our jobs. We hate our careers. We don't take downtime. I am recovering from that, and I am going to do so with baby steps. And so I am going, and as I do so, I'm going to do so for my family. And so I'm going to, as I try and institute the Lord's Day in my home, I'm going to do so in a way so my kids don't hate the Lord's Day too.
Yeah.
There are going to be things they look forward to. And I want you to catechize your children in Sunday afternoons. But you know what? I'm going to shock someone. If then it's like, and now we're watching a movie, do things they'll like, be with them, love them. And you might go, well, I don't know if in the evening, a film is the right mode of, me neither. But we're going to grow. And and most of us are going, like the don't let your kids play. Dude, police your own pleasures way harder first. Like, don't call your kids like, sorry, kids.
Says the guy scrolling X. Hey, quit having fun. Kids, it's the Lord's Day. You're not supposed to have fun.
Yeah. When you guys go to bed, I'm watching Sunday Night Football. But I don't know if we should watch a movie. Like, and so I just think that we get in all these knots. And because here's the other reason that's important. Is as you grow, I do want you, because it happens to me, I want you to experience conviction over the Lord's Day without shame. I want you to experience conviction, but I don't want you to have shame. I want you to go, this doesn't actually make sense with what I'm saying today is for, and I'm not doing it anymore. Yep. I have so many examples of this from my own life. Let me give, I don't know how many I want to give, but let me give one.
I can give one too.
So a lot of it comes from doing things that cause others to work. That's a big one for me, which again is not we live in this time where it's like the response, because we're all legalists, is, well, all of those things were going to be open and functioning whether or not I go to them or whatever. Again, you're asking the wrong question. I'm asking, I want to honor God and rest in him. And you're asking, what are the economics of you not going to Quick Trip on Sunday? it's just that I don't know, man. Get out of bizarro world. Join everyone where they live. But especially back when we had to set everything up super early for our church plant, and we had like very minimal ability to make coffee. I remember one Sunday I was like, I got to be there so early. And I drove through Dunkin' Donuts because my church plant runs on Dunkin', like a good American church. And they handed me the coffee early Sunday morning. And I just looked at this, 19-year-old girl handing me a cup of coffee. And I literally just had this moment of like, I have just received coffee from someone, and that is why they're not going to church. I will never do this again. And I will never do this again. And and you're like, and is that different than, oh, suddenly I learn a family's coming over after church and I go buy a pre-prepared meal on my way up? I don't feel the same way about that, by the way. And so this is what I'm doing but I didn't collapse into shame. I confessed that as sin. And I said, I'm changing because I love God and I love that other person in this case, right? So there's one example.
Yeah. We had recently, my wife and I both had this realization. So being a pastor, obviously, things can be a little bit different in the
Yes.
sense that, guess what? Like, you're working on Sunday.
Yep.
Now, it should still be rest to you. It should still
You may
be
need
true.
physical or mental rest on another day because of
Yep.
what you
Well,
have
and
to put in
even,
for worship.
yeah, I mean, even on that day, right? So like
Yeah, yeah.
even on that day, but just meaning like the Sabbath is not it is not a prohibition on exertion, which is where this goes a lot of the time.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
comes up for people who are wondering, if they're if the Westminster Confession goes too far in what it says about Sabbath and stuff like that, because it says you shouldn't be partaking in worldly recreations, and we can get into what that actually probably means, and at least my thoughts on it sometime. But when it comes to things like, people often give the example of, well, is it wrong for me to take a family walk? Well, of course not.
Right.
That's only a question, because no one would be like, hey, you shouldn't drive to church. You can't, in other words, don't exert yourself in any way. No, guess what? When the Sabbath commands were given, it was given to a people who had to do a lot of work to eat.
Right.
And a lot of work just to do the bare necessities that have to be done. Now, maybe we're blessed being in a position where that's not as true. But, even in times past, the Puritan times or others where it's like, man, they were really harsh about the Sabbath. They had to walk to church. Right. Okay. And
Yep.
then the legalist mind is like, well, is it better to walk or is it better to drive? Because if you're driving, you're doing less. That it's just such an absurdity that you would even think of it. Right. There's nothing like there is no, prohibition on exertion, on the use of energy. It's not wrong to do that. But anyway, I digress a little bit. But we just had a realization that because often, Sundays are a day where, we're pretty tired afterward. Sometimes Sundays kind of, even though it should be the first day of the week, it kind of feels like the last day of the week for pastors a lot of the time. And it is the kind of thing where, hey, if we've had a really crazy busy week, it's full, we've had people over all the time. We get home on Sundays from church, and we've been at church since early. We're often the last people to leave. We get home, we kind of crash. And what that's led us to sometimes is, I'm going to pull out my phone and, scroll. And we just had this thought of, oh man, we don't need to be doing that, right? Like, there's so many good things that we could be doing. And I don't even necessarily think it's inherently wrong to do that in certain ways, maybe, but just the sense of, oh, there are many better ways that we could be spending our time together on Sunday that are much more in keeping with what the Lord would want for us. And so we should seek to do that. And this is what I want to say too, then, is this has kind of been coming up. But as we've said, like the Sabbath is actually for something. Also, the Sabbath is, it's for you, right? It's for man. This is from Mark chapter 2. Dealing with the Sabbath, it says, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck the heads of grain, right? They're exerting themselves to eat, right? They are exerting themselves. And what, so many people are going to be like, oh, that's, just check yourself, because if you saw somebody, I'm trying to think of a good similar example. But if you saw somebody that, went out to the garden, for instance, to pick some food for lunch that day on the Sabbath, would you think, shouldn't be doing that?
Right.
Shouldn't be out in the garden. It's a Sunday, That's what's going on. And the Pharisees were saying to him, look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath? And he said to them, have you never read what David did when he was in need and was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. Even just that little flip of, hey, this is actually something that's good for you. It's for you. It's not so that you struggle all day. It's not the day that you eat less because you're just going to eat granola bars because it's the easiest and least, it's the least amount of exertion that you can give. No, that's not what this is about. It's not about a lack of exertion. It's about giving yourself to the things that are best for you, that are good for you, right? Again, it is the Lord saying yes to a bunch of things, and having you set aside time so that you can say yes to a bunch of things that are good for you and good for your soul, things which are good in and of themselves, instead of exerting yourself for those things that perish.
Well, we hope you Sabbath max. Maybe that's what we called this, Sabbath maxing.
We did. It was Sabbath maxing. We figured it out.
I'd love for everyone to Sabbath max. I love these conversations. Like I said, let us know how you've grown in the Sabbath. Let us know what questions you have, and we'll keep talking about it.